Over the years, video game platformers have taken many shapes and forms. It takes something special to stand apart from the rest. Ruffy in the Riverside immediately grabs your attention with its hand-drawn visuals, fun character designs, and decently sized world waiting to be explored. Having followed the development of Ruffy for a few years now, I was excited to finally get my hands on the game and explore this vast, colorful world. Ruffy in the Riverside is the story of Ruffy, a bear who discovers he may very well be the chosen one who can stop the mischievous Grawl from destroying the world core. You'll have to recover the letters of what is essentially the Hollywood sign, with each letter being scattered across different levels. Along the way, you're joined by Pip the Bee, and you'll meet a whole cast of characters. Every area has someone new to meet and new dialogue to discover, which really help make this world come alive. Occasionally, you'll see a few cutscenes where the camera angles get a bit more dynamic and helps put more emphasis on the story and the events going on. Going into it, I didn't think I'd care so much about the story, and after finishing the game, it honestly wasn't the most memorable. It serves as a great motivation for what you're doing, but that's about it. Every story beat seems mostly relevant in the moment, and while I don't think it's something I'll be thinking back to in the future, it's pretty charming for what it is. But every character's written with a somewhat humorous tone that got a few chuckles out of me over the course of the game. The game is very much a love letter to platformers from the early Nintendo and N64 days. The most obvious comparison, given our two protagonists and the overall nature of Ruffy and the Riverside, is Banjo-Kazooie. But there's also a lot of levels that are clearly inspired by The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario 64. You've got your typical platformer controls here, running, jumping, ground pounds, and punching. Initially, there's not much combat, and even when there is, it's not really challenging. On top of that, it's usually not even required. But there are the occasional boss fights throughout the game. Running, jumping, and punching all felt pretty responsive, but a frequent issue I had with the controls occurred anytime I had to climb a ladder or a wall. Ruffy would either quickly fall off, not be able to climb off, or once he reached the top, just totally fall back down. It's one of the small inconveniences that I encountered that proved to be a hassle throughout the entire duration of the game. Ruffy in the Riverside is also a bit of a collectathon too. There's a lot of collectibles to find here, the most abundant of which are the coins, and you can spend these on health upgrades or even new capes for Ruffy. Each cape has a different color and can be individually upgraded through a kind of slot machine kind of minigame, so it's from here that I decided what I'd wear. It's a fun way of giving your gear upgrades without immediately making one overpowered. Other collectibles include butterflies that are roaming around certain parts of the map, little creatures called the E-Toy, which can be found by solving puzzles, and gems. There's enough collectibles to find where you can just walk a short distance and you'll probably find something new. I ended up not even finding all of the collectibles before the end of my first playthrough, so the game has a lot to offer. You can kinda track where things are with the map, but it's pretty much good for nothing other than looking. It would have been nice to have some sort of control or even set a waypoint, but Ruffy does have one trick up his sleeve. What sets Ruffy in the Riverside apart from other 3D platformers is its unique swap mechanic. Ruffy possesses the special ability to swap, allowing him to take a material or color from one part of the world and replace another with it. I'd love to tell you that the options for what you can swap are limitless, but it's not like you can swap everything. That being said, most of the world can be swapped, allowing for many puzzles to have a multitude of solutions. Whether you're grabbing a color, a material, or even the literal sun, it's fun to look around and see what you can swap. Everything you're able to swap is on a time limit, so if it runs out, you have to recopy it again. This also means you can't bring a swap too far, which often helped me find the solutions to puzzles by realizing the answer was closer than I thought. No matter how stuck I got, I knew the solution couldn't be too far. It's a very unique approach to how you advance throughout the many regions of the Riverside, and figuring out how to use swaps to defeat enemies or solve a puzzle remains mostly satisfying. Even if I could figure out a solution right away for many puzzles, it became just a matter of finding what I needed to solve it. The first swap you get to do at the start of the game consists of swapping a waterfall with vines so that you can climb it. This mechanic comes back a lot as many of the waterfalls you encounter are right next to vines, and you climb them up to discover something new. It's a fun gimmick to try and take advantage of, and there were many moments where I would have an idea, and to my surprise, I was actually able to try it. There's a bit of logic behind the puzzles too, such as having to turn something into a metal in order for it to become heavier and weigh it down. Swapping to new materials never got old per se, but there were points where it felt like the solutions were a bit repetitive. I do love the mechanic as a whole, but maybe it got a little stale when I could instantly figure out the answer to a puzzle after only standing there for a second or two. Many levels also have these 2D segments in the walls that you're able to climb into, which were very similar to the 2D segments found in Super Mario Odyssey. It's not always required, but usually there's an obstacle in them that must be swapped from the outside in order to proceed. Sometimes these stump me for a bit and I'd be trying every possible swap, only for the solution to maybe have been incredibly obvious and I was overthinking it the whole time. In addition to these shorter 2D segments, there's also a few minigames and challenges to find throughout your adventure, like hay bale races, and it's a nice change of pace from the typical platforming that Ruffy in the Riverside has to offer. While mostly just for optional collectibles, there are a few moments where you have to take part in these side adventures in order to progress forward. There is a Tony Hawk style half-pipe minigame where you need to perform tricks and earn the most points, and this was honestly one of the most frustrating parts of the whole experience for me. While not necessarily difficult and probably a skill issue, I spent so much time fighting the controls here that required such precision precision in order to score properly, on top of the game itself requiring a near-perfect performance in order to advance. It also didn't help that in order to participate you need a different material for your hay bale, so I was constantly switching it back and forth. Constant attempts really drained the fun out of this part for me, and when I think back to my playthrough, this was definitely my least favorite part. I eventually got the hang of it and was able to proceed, but I don't think I'll be going back to that. My favorite levels, however, were the smaller underground segments, which very much reminded me of the bonus levels you can find in 3D Mario games. These levels are condensed and present you with usually a ball and some blocks. You have to figure out the best way to swap the blocks so that the ball can advance to its spot, and it was these few moments where I actually had to stop and think about how to approach a puzzle that I had some of the most fun in the game. Figuring out the solutions was such an aha moment at times, and I was almost upset when I finished the puzzles and that it would be a little bit of time before the next one. One of Ruffy's main draws at first glance is its unique art style. The game is entirely hand-drawn. The whole 2D characters exploring a 3D environment isn't exactly a new idea for a platformer like this, but to actually be able to sort of decipher how a character came to be is such a cool detail that the artistic side of me is a huge fan of. I often found myself stopping just to admire the details that went into bringing Ruffy and his friends to life, especially how you can see the different strokes of brown in Ruffy's fur. While the Nintendo Switch's handheld mode proved the graphics to be less than flattering at times, most of my time spent was played docked, and it's a colorful experience where certain areas really pop. The music is fine, too. Every area had a fitting soundtrack to accompany it. It's not the most memorable, but I think it fits the general vibe that Ruffy and the Riverside seems to be going for. Especially the title track, which kinda keeps an upbeat mood and shows the happy-go-lucky character that Ruffy is. Ruffy's always making noise, too. Jumping, punching, he quickly cycles through a limited selection of giggles and grunts that's a bit charming at first, but honestly grew to be a bit annoying. I powered through, but luckily there are settings to independently adjust music and sound effects. Performance was pretty decent for the most part. As I mentioned earlier, I played the Nintendo Switch version, but I was actually playing on Nintendo Switch 2 and still had a few performance issues. Not too concerning because it is a brand new console, but if you're planning to play Ruffy on Nintendo, just know that the game is running at higher performance on Switch 2 compared to Switch 1. I experienced the most lag when traveling from the main village into the more open world of Riverside, but just know that while noticeable, the game is far from unplayable. I mentioned earlier how the game can look less than ideal in handheld mode, and as somebody who can normally look past less than ideal graphics, Ruffy makes it hard to ignore at moments where the screen zooms in and essentially focuses on it. There's also been a fair share of glitches too, such as falling through the ground and causing me to totally restart the game from my last save at certain points, or other times where characters would explain something happening in the story to me or explain my objective after I had already completed it, but the boss fights are where I encountered the most problems. One boss frequently softlocked me or somehow froze my ability to swap and proceed, and I'd have to shut the game and restart again. Other bosses were riddled with glitches where I would constantly take damage without being in contact with anything damaging. I never experienced a game over in my time playing Ruffy, but there were many cases where I came close to it, and it usually wasn't my fault. None of this, however, hindered my overall enjoyment of the game. I just find it worth mentioning as in the moment it did leave me a bit flustered, but having been through the entire adventure, I had a fun time saving the world. Ruffy and the Riverside is a mostly fun adventure from start to finish. I had a fun time exploring the various areas throughout Riverside, but I can't recall any instance where my expectations were exceeded. A fun adventure from start to finish, I really enjoyed how swapping could lead to some more thought-provoking puzzles, but there was nothing here that necessarily blew me away. If you're looking for a simple and fun platforming adventure, I say give it a go. There were moments of inconsistent performance that led to a bit of frustration at times, but it's nothing that can't be fixed in the future. I'm excited to return to Riverside with the bear and the bee, and get all the collectibles to see more of what this world has to offer.